the way that I ended up in the group in the first place was because of my father. Because this whole concept of drug addiction and alcoholism and recovery even has been in my life as long as I can remember. Because as early as I can remember, I was told, you know, my father wasn't around. I was told that your dad is an alcoholic, right? And I know I was told he was like, you know, a recovering alcoholic. He was in AA or whatever. So when I was like 13, a friend took me to an Alateen meeting. Alateen is like a organization for children whose parents are alcoholics or drug addicts, you know, like a support group. And he took me to that because he knew, and his mom knew the story that my father was an alcoholic. So he took me to that, and then from there, he said, oh, I went to this other place, you should come to this place, right? And that other place ended up being the group. Not that much long after I got into the group, my dad killed himself. Because he had been in like AA for several years and had started drinking again, and I guess just couldn't hack it or something. That threat of dying from all of this became very real to me. You know, it was tangible at that point. It wasn't just a metaphor. It was actual death. Yeah, because my dad did die. You know, that became very real to me. And you know, basically, one of the reasons that I started making this movie is because my dad killed himself when he was 36, and I'm going to be 36 very soon. And I kind of, you know, I remember even saying to an old friend one time, like, I don't think I'm going to live past 36 because that's when my dad died, when he was 36. And so that sort of, you know, that cloud kind of hovering over me, you know, that timeline coming up was part of what prompted me to do this. It was like, I've got to do something about all this before I reach that looming age of 36 years old. People who study this stuff will tell you that addiction and alcoholism and stuff can be genetic, you know. And so if you're like a child of an alcoholic or a drug addict, you might be genetically predisposed to also have that same problem. And that was definitely reinforced, but it didn't take a lot to reinforce it to me because I knew that too, you know, so it scared the hell out of me, you know. If I don't stay here, then I'm going to end up basically like my dad did, you know. That's, you know, the things that my counselors would always talk to me about. That's the reason I did everything that I did, because I was, you know, I was angry at my father and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And it was definitely used as a tactic to kind of control me. And again, it didn't take much to convince me because it terrified me that I would end up that way. I guess some ways I was able to justify it to myself that I needed to be there despite the fact that I hadn't really been on a lot of drugs or drank. It was like, well, my dad had this, so I obviously have got it too. So I've got to be vigilant about myself and my life to make sure that I don't end up like that. You know, when my dad died, I was given some of his stuff, and some of the stuff that I was given was like his AA big book. You know, and like we would have the big book in the group too. You know, like we would read stuff from it, and I got his copy of that. There was like this leather-bound version, and I got some of his, like, you know, in AA they give you like sobriety chips. You know, and I got some of his sobriety chips. So it just was like, it just seems so natural for me. Like I'm supposed to be a part of this whole recovery thing, and you know. And in some ways I thought too, like, oh, you know, my dad just did it wrong because he went to AA, and he should have, you know, if he could have just only been a part of the group, you know.
The fact that you shared something with your dad, or that you were like, I mean, how did that?
Yeah, man, that weird, like, fucked upness of the fact that my only connection to my dad was that I had this disease that he also had. That was the only connection I had to him. I mean, I went to inpatient treatment carrying his AA big book, you know? And there was almost like a sense of me as like, I'm gonna win this fight that you lost. I don't know, am I? Oh, fuck, I don't like this. To me now, I feel like I'll win that fight when my daughter grows up.
Do you think you have this disease, some disease?
I don't know, man. I mean, I think ultimately that's why I made this movie, just to answer that question right there. There have been times in my life where I certainly felt like I did. But I don't even know if it's a thing. Like, I don't even know if it's real. Like, if it's I mean, look, I'm sure that there is such a thing as alcoholism, and I'm sure there's such a thing as drug addiction, and people have that. But for my situation, I don't know. I mean, there have been times in my life where I've abused alcohol. You know, there have been times in my life where I've done things that I regretted because of it. And in a lot of those times afterwards, when I'm reflecting back on it, I would say, well, obviously I did that because I have this disease. As I've gotten older, I just would go like, oh, I did that because I'm a dumbass, you know? And I know a lot of other people have done dumb things in those situations. You know, it doesn't play a huge role in my life anymore because I just found other things that were more important to me, you know? I don't know. I don't know if I have it, man.
Have you figured anything out or found any clarity?
Yeah, I found out I don't care. I mean, so what if I do? You know, like, you know, do I have this thing? Well, okay, if I do, I'm smart enough to manage it. You know, I'm not gonna like start going to meetings and stuff and stop drinking. I like to, you know, have a drink, so I'm not gonna stop that. But I'm focused on other things that are more important to me. You know, I've got a family that I care about more than anything, and I want to be there for. And you know, I guess for the longest time after I left the group, I had that idea in my head that, you know, I've got this addiction problem, I've got this disease, and you know, and kind of walking around like it was a secret or something. And I've just gotten to the point where I just don't care about it anymore, you know? It's more important to me now that I do that thing, you know, for my child that my father wasn't around to do, you know, and just being a parent, you know, just being a dad. That's more important to me now than, you know, whether or not I've inherited some, you know, genetic predisposition to alcoholism.